All right. Hello, all. Thank you for being here today. You are in the Title I Schoolwide Programming training. Hopefully, that's the right place for you. I am Rita Pello, a Title I Program Coordinator. I'm going to be joined with my counterpart, Jess Karen, and the Management Analyst from the ESEA team, Tyra Corson, as well as helping us facilitate the training today is our mighty leader, Shelly Chase-Jandro. She is our ESEA Director. So there's a whole team of us and there's a whole team of you out here today to learn a bit more about Title I Schoolwide. In order for there to be a clean recording for available access and use after this training for folks here or not here, we will have a designated time to ask questions after we go through the content today. However, if something in the slides sort of tickles your fancy to ask a question, you can absolutely drop it in chat, especially if you think you might forget it in a few minutes. And then at the end, we will make sure to go through the chat and hit up any questions that were typed there. Today, the topics we're going to cover are plentiful. I'm going to go over school-wide programming in general related to, of course, our Title I statute, our federal flagship legislation. There is Lyndon B. Johnson on April 11th, 1965, seated with his childhood school teacher, Kate Diedrich Loney. He's delivering marks as he's signing the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and this is in Stonewall, Texas. So just a little history for us history nerds. We will talk about the ESEA application, school-wide consolidation, what that means, the budgeting and spending at school-wide programs, record keeping and documentation. This is a federal grant. We all know and are very well aware of the record keeping requirements. Monitoring, we monitor programs in the schools for these federal grants. So what does that mean for a school-wide program? And of course, the available resources and guidance. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So if something today in the training makes you want to ask more questions, dive in, get some more personal assistance, that is really what this is for today. I am very well aware that we have multiple roles here today. We have principals, we have coordinators and business managers, and some of you might be 2 or 3 of those, or 5, 6, 7, 8 other hats that you wear. I hope today for principals, you learn what it means to lead a school-wide Title I program, that you feel empowered in understanding the students you can serve, the flexibilities you have, the requirements you must be aware of. For coordinators to understand the key aspects of school-wide so you're that key personnel that supports the school leadership with your business office and the federal dollars that are coming in. Obviously, you are responsible for completing that fiscal year ESEA consolidated application every year. And so to ensure that you can do that with fidelity and effectiveness. And then, of course, business managers, we have our Tyra Corson here today to go through the fiscal aspects of the budgeting, the spending, and the record keeping so that you can leverage the flexibilities for your SAUs and schools, and so that your entire team can feel like you're on the same page and you're working towards improving the outcomes for your students in those schools. So I'm going to first start with key components of school-wide programming and planning. What does it take to run a school-wide program? How can a school-wide program benefit my Title I school? So just to really broaden this, Title I, right, is federal legislation, and there's 2 types of programs. A Title I school-wide program aims to boost achievement for all students in the high poverty schools. And they do this by upgrading the entire school program. So that's sort of the idea of a Title I school-wide program, is that the funds are geared towards that comprehensive school-wide reform, not just that targeted intervention or pull-out model for struggling students. Now, of course, just because it's for all school-wide reform, I would be remiss to say that still, of course, the emphasis is on students who are failing to meet state standards. There are a whole lot of key components of Title I school-wide programs, but most of them, I will say, for those school leaders in the building are probably work you're doing already. However, with school-wide programs, it's really rooted in that school-wide plan. And a school-wide plan is based on that comprehensive needs assessment. that you've looked at a myriad of types of data to understand how your school is doing, the climate, the academics, the social emotional, et cetera, right? To understand how your students are doing. And it's data driven for that exact reason. The other key component of Title I Schoolwide Program that I'm probably going to say many times today is that it can serve all students. Of course, that special focus is on those lowest achieving and those highest needs, because these federal dollars are really geared towards highest needs in a school or district, which, by the way, I'll call SAU a lot here. So SAU district, and in federal legislation, it's LEA. So we have three names to say central office here. Research-based strategies, proven methods and programs to boost learning and reduce opportunity gaps, right? The idea is that you're using the strategies that are going to work. Parent and community engagement, active involvement of families in the school's goals and activities. Professional development, ongoing training for teachers and staff to meet those student needs. Funding consolidation. This is a big one, and we actually have a very robust section to go over this later in the presentation. Continuous evaluation, regular assessment of programs and adjustment of the plan. Again, as school leaders and district leaders, you're doing this. You must, right? This is a lot of the times the work that you have to do to continue to improve outcomes of your schools. That's part of this as well, is that you're evaluating your plan and your programs and you're adjusting them when necessary. And then eligibility and Maine DOE approval. If you are currently a targeted assistance program and looking to transition to school-wide, I will explain how that process is done. Before I go on further, I did mention that Title I is 2 programs. We in the state have a little bit over the majority functioning as school-wide, but that leaves about 40-ish% of our programs are targeted assistance programs. And nationally, it's about 86% that are school-wide. So I'm hoping to move some Maine schools to school-wide for this exact reason, if you take a look at this graph. In a targeted assistance program, it has to be specific students who are identified for services. And for those of you that are nerdy and read statute, you know that that's multiple objective criteria, right? So you're really having to document and keep records of how you're identifying your students. In a school-wide program, it's all students that are Title I students, and they're all eligible for services. In a targeted assistance program, it only targets resources to those identified students. In a school-wide, it promotes improved instruction for all. So you can kind of think of that Tier 1 instruction or your professional development for all staff, as opposed to maybe those Tier 3 interventions. In a targeted assistance program, you have professional development with Title I funds that can only go to that staff. Now, Title I funds can be used to provide PD for all staff. Family engagement activities are meant for parents of students in the Title I program. Now, family engagement is for all parents. Teachers paid for with Title I funds are responsible for facilitating the program. In a school-wide program, all your staff support it, and there's no distinction. Every teacher is a Title I teacher. So that is sort of the general idea of the program. What I think is really important to go through is the school-wide plan. The school-wide plan is your North Star. Once you assess the school needs, how your students are doing, who's most at risk of failing, and you've consulted the broad range of stakeholders that are required in statute, you will then describe how the methods and strategies that you've determined to meet those high needs, how they strengthen the program, how they increase the amount of quality learning time, and provide enriched, accelerated curriculum, including programs and activities that are necessary for a well-rounded education. We are trying to sort of get out of the paradigm that it's only math and literacy intervention that is available for Title I. That is a myth, and it is not true. So we want to make sure that we continue to express well-rounded education in your schools for a Title I school-wide program. I'm going to quickly talk about something that is not necessarily my wheelhouse. However, very excitingly, I know many schools in the state are identified as either CSI, ATSI, or TSI. And for each of those identified schools, you're also having to develop school level plans that are informed by the indicators in the accountability system. They're identifying resource inequities. You're including evidence-based interventions, and you have school needs assessments. And they're created and implemented in partnership with stakeholders. So if you're someone that said, wait a second, that's a lot of overlap with what Title I schoolwide programs require, you are correct. There is a lot of overlap with how federal grant money in Title I wants to empower school and SAU or district leadership to understand the needs and funnel the grant funding to those needs. So what I'm excited to share today is available online as of yesterday afternoon. We have new templates. And I can talk more about this at the end of the presentation for those that have questions. But for those of you on the call today that are fierce leaders of one school districts, there is a combined one for your SAU level and your school level plans. For those of you of the Lewistons today in the house with multiple schools, we have an SAU level template, and then we have separate school level ones. So for each of your schools, you can have a separate one. And these are going to meet all of the requirements. So your CSI, ATSI, TSI, and school-wide requirements in statute are all going to be merged and have been merged in that template. My recommendation for those of you on the call today, which is why I'm glad you're here, is to spend some time transitioning to the new templates. Can't lie to you to say that it won't be more work now, but certainly less work later. And the reason for that being also, I'm excited to announce that we've been working with our data warehouse team to create a data platform for the comprehensive needs assessment work. It's going to be easier to analyze student data. Templates are no longer going to require any copying and pasting of data because I will be able to transparently see your district and school level data when I review your plans. So you'll no longer need to tell me what your data is. You should just spend your time with the analysis and the narratives and the creation of the plan. I want to give a shout out to the Title I Committee of Practitioners who have been bravely and patiently working on this for over a year. And so we will, along with Brett Mullen of the DOE, we will be sharing more broadly this dashboard, and we will be providing it for folks, school leaders and SAU leaders. Now, one thing I think I haven't seen enough of in the school level plans, and part of it was the difficulty with the template, the previous iteration, but it's really important that folks on this training understand that in statute, there are required subgroups to be disaggregating and understanding how their performance is measuring to general ed performance. And those subgroups in statute are the economically disadvantaged students, students from any major racial and ethnic groups, children with disabilities, and multilingual learners. The other students that are specifically called out in statute as being eligible for services based on their vulnerability and their transient nature in schools are students who are experiencing homelessness, your students who are migrant, and in federal statute, it's still called this, but it's students who are neglected or delinquent. So those are students who have been adjudicated in the courts system or are emancipated to state custody. And again, right, they are vulnerable student populations that when you're thinking through your school needs assessments, you'll want to have this lens. The other part of your plan and just in general, your programming for Title I is your research-based strategies I mentioned earlier, professional development, and family and community engagement. What I appreciate about a Title I school-wide program model is that it's often something that doesn't have to be an aside, but instead could be the container of the work that you're already doing. You're already facilitating PD in your schools. You already have community and family engagement opportunities. You're already providing evidence-based interventions or instructional practices or working towards improving them. You, of course, are coordinating assessments and communicating those practices. And of course, services like Head Start or Perkins or CTE, etc. So a lot of this work is happening already and is required in Title I school-wide programs. And so, as I mentioned earlier in this call, we have targeted assistance programs probably doing a lot of the work that is required for school-wide programming. Rather than sort of having it for whole school, they only have it for a set number of students. So this is a good way to think about school-wide programming, is that it's not going to be a totally separate thing from what schools and SAUs are doing already, including continuous evaluation. Similarly to anything that we do in school improvement and the work of helping our students, you're monitoring progress towards your goals. You're using data and other indicators to understand how you're doing. You're adjusting instructional strategies, interventions, and supports based on those results. And you're doing this annually. And that is oftentimes baked into the ESEA application as well. You're documenting your stakeholders in your annual plan. So that's already happening on an SAU level. If it's happening on the school level, why not be a school-wide program? And that leads me to this last bit before Jess will take it away. Applying for school-wide programming is as simple as submitting the plans that you've worked on with your stakeholders, your required stakeholders in statute, by July 1 to me. I take a look at that to ensure that all statutory requirements and that the planning is done with fidelity so that your next fiscal year application, your ESEA coordinator has the option to create a school-wide page. So that is really the entire process, is that you just send us that school-wide plan. I'm happy to talk more about this, etc., but we're going to move on to exactly that. Once you become a school-wide program, what does that application look like?
Great, thank you, Rita. So as Rita outlined, now we're going to go into what this looks like specifically in the ESEA consolidated application. And then we're going to also go through what some of those Title I school-wide flexibilities are and how you might leverage those locally. And we'll also go over documentation as well as we do this. Okay, so this is just kind of a summary of what it's going to look like, and then we'll go into the pages in more detail. So within the ESEA consolidated application, there's intersection with that school-wide plan. These intersections occur first on the annual school needs assessment page, and on that page, you're required to provide a description of your needs assessment process, identify what those high needs are, what subgroups you're addressing, what stakeholders are involved in this process, and then what your goals are as a result of that needs assessment. On the project details page, there are intent and purpose statements. And again, we'll go into that in more detail. And also we're tracking local funding levels. And then we have the school-wide budget pages themselves, where you budget all the money for the plan. Okay, so the project details page. We really revamped this page last year to try to make it more clear what should be written here. A lot of districts are writing really detailed notes on what they were spending their money on, which you can. However, you're only required to write how you're meeting the intent and purpose of the titles that are helping to fund your school-wide plan. Intent and purpose, why the law and program exists, purpose, what the program was designed to do. What you're doing with those intent and purpose statements is signifying that the school is meeting the requirements in the law and in the program. And in essence, it's freeing up the money to be used on anything that is working towards those identified high needs. Anything that's, of course, reasonable, necessary, and applicable. So we'll go through some examples of what this looks like, and in this example, you'll see how one school in particular is utilizing both Title I and Title II funds for their school-wide plan. And in the project details, they outline how they're meeting those Title II professional development requirements and how they're meeting those supports for struggling learners under Title I. So the last piece I just want to note on this page is at the very bottom. Districts are required to write how much is being spent on the school with local and state dollars. What we're tracking there is just making sure you're not decreasing funds due to the federal money. The federal money is meant to supplement your local and state budgets. It cannot supplant. So that's what we're tracking with that piece on the project details page. Before we go into that project budget page, we wanted to just clarify the difference between consolidation and transferring because we've seen there's a lot of confusion in the field between those two concepts. Consolidation is what occurs on the project budget page for a school project. In consolidation, the funds remain in the title they were awarded in. The expenses must be tracked under that title. And you've written intent and purpose statements to show that you're meeting the intent and purpose of that law. However, those funds can be spent on any approved school-wide expense that is working towards that school-wide plan. Transferring, however, the funds that you're awarded, you're actually putting into another title. They take on that identity. So for example, if you transfer Title II to Title I, you no longer have Title II funds if you transfer all of that money. They are now Title I funds. So those expenses are only tracked by the title you transfer them in. This occurs on the allocations page in the ESEA application. Something to keep in mind is that rules get triggered when you transfer funds. So for example, some of the small SAUs I work with who even when they transfer money in, they're below 50,000, they don't have the 15% carryover rule to pay attention to. So they just transfer all their money into Title I, and then on the accounting side, they just have one title to track. So that's a great fit for them. But there's a lot of reasons why districts choose to transfer versus consolidate, and we'll go through some more examples when we look at the pages themselves. Okay, so this is what it looks like when you budget at a school-wide school. You can see on the left-hand side where that green box is, there's a check box that you have to mark. You can see the total amount the school district is putting at that Title I school. And you can also see there's nothing budgeted under the budget categories. That lump sum under Title I and Title II can be spent on anything that is working towards the high needs that is, of course, reasonable, necessary, and allocable. So again, like the reason why we don't have you budget under those categories is because you have flexibility here. Okay, next page, Rita, thank you. Okay, this is where the transferring occurs within the ESEA application. This is on the allocations page. Here, you can see that the district transferred their Title IV dollars into Title II and Title I. They no longer have Title IV dollars. They are tracked as Title I and Title II dollars. I just want to note that again, I gave one example of a small SAU and why they chose to transfer. Some other examples might be the district is working with a non-public. The non-public wants Title II dollars, so they keep the money there. Another district might want to provide professional development at schools that are not Title I schools, so they keep it in Title II. There's a lot of reasons why you would choose transferring versus consolidation, and we just want you to think strategically about why you're choosing one over the other. Okay, so consolidating, here's the intent and purpose boxes. I thought this was a great example of a school district who is choosing to consolidate Title I and Title II in a school-wide project. Here, they have not written out every little detail of what they're spending on. They have written out how they're meeting the intent and purpose of that title, as well as how they're spending their local and state dollars to work towards that school-wide plan. You can see with Title II, They are describing how the school provides professional developments, mentoring, evaluation. Now we can see they're meeting that requirement, so they can spend it on, again, whatever expenses work towards the high needs identified in their school-wide plan. And I'll pass this example off to Rita. You are muted, Rita.
I have to unmute. Can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. So this is a more complicated example. We wanted to show both because Title IV has the three categories. And so if you are a school district that has an equitable service arrangement with a non-public, and they are used to taking Title IV into and using those services, right, from your SAU, then maybe transferring is not the option. But consolidation could still enable that same flexibility. So let's say for Title IV, for that SAU that couldn't transfer it out of for simplicity's sake, and had to consolidate. What this is showing you as an example is an SAU and slash school that have basically assured us through the intent and purpose statements that they do facilitate opportunities for well-rounded education. They facilitate opportunities for safe and healthy schools and effective use of technology, freeing them up to utilize those Title IV funds for things that are documented in their school-wide plan. So maybe their non-public SAU still has a Title IV project, but maybe this SAU is using those Title IV dollars at that school to be flexibly spent. So that is and I wanted to mention again that the title loses its identity programmatically in that case. All right, we're going to get into our fiscal part where it comes to the application grants for me. So Tyra, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Over this next section of the presentation, we are going to review reporting expenditures, performance report and invoicing, reimbursements and grants for me, and required record keeping, which, spoiler alert, that is no different from any other federal grant, even a school-wide program. Next slide. So here we have a picture of the budget for a school-wide plan. And in Grants for Me, you will need to report your expenses out by object code in the performance report, in any reimbursement request, and closeout reports. They are done by budget code, and the budget for school-wide or targeted, doesn't matter, in the ESEA application is done by project. Whereas on the invoicing side, it is consolidated into the award itself. You do not invoice by project. Next slide. Here, this is showing you the pages that you fill out in the application. The left-hand screenshot tells you where you would enter these amounts on your performance report. And you can see that even though the Title I was used for a school-wide plan, they have invoiced in the proper categories and put the amounts in the object code and function code. The function codes are down the left side of the project expenditure page, and the object codes are across the top. So reimbursements and grants for me, you have on your left-hand side will be the invoicing tab. Click on that. It brings up your project summary page where you can create a new invoice. And for performance report, you would click on the very last invoice for a service period ending 9/30. Once you click on that, it will bring you to the expenditure page. Thank you, Rita. the expenditure page on the invoicing side. So you can see that the amounts in red is what needs to be reported on your performance report in grants for me. And they need to be reported in those categories. Next page. A good way to double check and make sure that you have reported them correctly is the top screenshot is from the invoicing side of the house, and the project totals by grant is a page in the ESEA application. You will notice that this particular district has reported their Title I correctly. The totals align. So the total from the expenditure detail page in the invoicing system and the total by project, the total on the project totals by grant match. So you know you have done it correctly before you submit your performance report. Next page. Okay, so this is just a reminder of the record keeping for school-wide plans. And the backup documentation is no different from any other federal grant. You must keep invoices, receipts, contracts, etc. The difference will be with time and effort reporting, because a school-wide plan covers multiple objectives, and you can report that on one affirmative statement. It does not need to be reported out on a personal activity report. There is resources available on our website. I have the link here, and I will put it in chat as well for your convenience. But certainly, if you have any questions about the record keeping, please contact me. And before I let you go, I just want to go back to what Jess was saying and Rita was saying. When you transfer your funds into one title and then you invoice for those funds under that title, know that you will receive two payments for that request, because behind the scenes, your funds are still in like a Title II account, say. So a portion of the payment comes from Title II and Title I if you are transferring 2 to 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that additional details, Tyra. So yes, budgeting, spending, sort of high picture, invoicing and record keeping still very much in tune with what you're doing with your other titles and programs that are not school-wide. I just want to go through additional Title I requirements that will marry some of this work and presentation all together. It's important to note for school-wide programs that and districts that are here with us on this call, there is still required set-aside funding. And I just want to be really clear that homeless students in statute are in the SAU level comprehensive needs assessment. So your districts should understand your schools experiencing the students that are experiencing homelessness in the schools. And if that, and I just want to plug this one more time too, if that homeless student does not attend a Title I student, they actually still can receive services and things that help them achieve and basically access school with Title I dollars. So even at a non-Title I school, a student experiencing homelessness can receive some of those academic supports with Title I dollars. That's why it's a district set aside. Family engagement requirement, that for districts who are on this call today that receive more than $500,000 in Title I, you're aware that you make a set-aside project where 90% has to be spent at the school level. If you reserve more than that, 1%, that additional funds don't have those same rules. So if a district really has a district level initiative when it comes to family engagement, you can reserve more than that 1% set aside. So options are good to know. Fiscal carryover rules, Jess mentioned this, right? If you have more than 50,000 in Title I, you have to be spending that down the year that it's awarded. So that's where transferring, sometimes it's just important to note, for many SAUs, transferring to Title I and then just spending it on any high needs will be easier to track and keep all together. But for some schools with equitable services and lots of funding, consolidation might make more sense in terms of not triggering certain things and still being able to spend flexibly. So if you walk away with anything today, it's to know that you have options. And the idea here is to leverage flexibilities in school-wide programs so that you serve your highest needs and never leave money on the table. Title I supplement, not supplant, I'm about to go over because Jess did mention it briefly, but it is the way that Title I school-wide programs are monitored in the sense of a fiscal budgeting process. So when you're a school-wide program, what will you be monitored on? You will have to submit those plans. So I might not have seen your plans since you became a school-wide program, but when we're monitoring, Jess and I will see your plans, your most annually updated ones. We will also be asking for that neutral budgeting process, and that is to meet the supplement, not supplant provision. I'll go into that in a second. And then family and community engagement is whole school. So any progress reports, your parents' right to know is in your handbook. Your family engagement policy is whole school now. It's written as if it's just what your school does. So that when you are transitioning, it's good to note that some of that mindset shift around how you're going to engage families, because now every student is a Title I student, every parent is a Title I parent, every teacher is a Title I teacher. So how do you, embed the goals and the activities you have in your whole school reform? And then there will be additional fiscal district level and title requirements depending. Let's say you're a district that transfers out of Title II, you don't have Title II funding, then you are not required to submit evidence of Title II, for example. This is just really important because 2015 Obama's ESEA, targeted assistance programs, should hear this too. Now in targeted assistance and school-wide, we don't look at individual cost as to where it came from in the past. If it used to be a federal spent or if it was a local dollar. With Title I now, the flexibility in how we look at what you're spending on is your neutral, consistent methodology to budgeting your schools. The entire idea here is that you're not taking funds away from a high poverty Title I school because you anticipate receiving federal dollars. So we look for that. We ask for your methodology. We ask for spreadsheets. We ask to understand what you do so that your schools are all able to function locally and state by local and state provisions. And that is why we check your budget in the project details page, just to understand what's going on. You don't need to prove that every Title I cost is supplemental, or like I said, used to be paid with dollars, etc. We don't compare your spending line by line. So it's a holistic understanding that you're not underfunding your schools because you anticipate money. What you're spending it on and all of those things, there's flexibility depending on the high needs. So before we get into the questions and answers, this is the last slide. I just want to plug that we are very excited about this work. We're excited about the new data dashboard, the new templates. We did recently, I think this was last year, we did a training with Signe Lynch on McKinney-Vento and Title I set aside for homeless. So if you'd like to check that out, I'll share these in the chat here in a moment. The spending snapshot on allowability for Title I, and any guidance on becoming school-wide. We have all of those things. The other plug that I want to make is that Jess and I and your regional program managers are more than willing to come to your programs or meet with you via Zoom with your teams. The idea here is to empower you to create a level of confidence in the option so that your district and your schools truly feel like this funding is supporting what you as professionals and what your community has deemed most important. That's what we would like to support. So when you're looking there and going, what are we going to do to spend this money? And we're not sure, it doesn't fit with our plan. Well, you have flexibilities in spending under a school-wide model. You like I said, shouldn't be leaving dollars on the table now because you can support your students with more flexibility in spending. That's going to conclude this portion. Let's make sure that we thank you all for that, and I'll stop recording.